Would like to welcome you to the third session of Aljazeera Forum, which is entitled A War of Strategies. It concentrates on regional strategies. As you know, the war and aggression on Gaza and its regional extensions in Lebanon, Iran, Yemen, and Iraq, all of them have revealed the nature of the competing regional and international strategies in order to dominate the whole region. And with the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, the limits of some of these strategies have become clearer, exposing their capacity to endure and achieve their objectives. While others have faltered, relying on flawed calculations. How should we understand the current conflict, both visible and hidden manifestations between the strategies of regional powers such as Iran, Israel, and Turkey? And to what extent can the Arab role become independent and become more influential? This is a very important and complex question to be far from any dependence relationship. We have with us in this session a constellation of speakers. We have with us Dr. Mujtaba Firdousi-Poor, diplomat and professor of geopolitics, and Dr. Murad Shiltash, and Dr. Muhammad Hassan Al-Barari, and Dr. Shafiq Shuqair from Al Jazeera Research Center, and all titles preserved. I would like to start with Dr. Mujtaba Firdousi-Poor, and perhaps we have a question that we would like to pose here. Very, very sensitive indeed during this particular phase, which is relevant to the Iranian role, taking into account the developments in the region, starting from the war on Gaza, the developments in Lebanon, the fall of the regime in Syria. How would you answer these very difficult questions when it comes to the strategies in the region? Go ahead, sir. So each speaker will have 10 minutes. In the name of God, the most compassionate, the most merciful, my salutations to you, Dr. Fatima. At the outset, I would like to extend my thanks to Al Jazeera Forum for convening this meeting, this very valuable forum. There are four main components. Dr. Fatima are part of our study of the strategies in the region, and I would like to talk about these pieces of data. We have the future of international order. We have an international order, and which is multipolar. So what is important when it comes to the current situation, we have AI, and also we have some modern technologies that we have to take into account. Amongst the scenarios that we have with regard to the future of international order, far from this multipolar system, is much more advanced, but we know that we have a number of scenarios that I'm going to mention. The first scenario, the change of regime, is going to be amended by removing any ability to deal on the basis of democratic liberalism, and there's going to be some changes in international order. The third scenario is the collapse of the current regime. The fourth scenario is the social theory, and the fifth scenario is the international order will move towards chaos. But when it comes to these scenarios, I think that the international order was moving beyond this multipolar system based on data and big data in particular, and the outcomes are going to be a number of alliances that would shape themselves. And here I would like to bring to your attention that there are two regional pieces of data that are adopted and that rely on I2, IU2, and IMET corridor. So the goal of such procedures is to create the first impetus for economy and security through this Israeli regime, but all these equations, they remained suspended as a result of the operation on the 7th of October. So we have John Mershiner, who said in their detailed analysis when it comes to the 7th of October, so he thinks that this process, this operation has led to the destruction of the international balance of power. And in light of the failure in the region from the part of Israel, and in light of the interests of the United States of America in the region. So I think the scenario that has the most possibilities is the chaotic scenario for Israel to be able to preserve its hegemony, in the region. So when we talk about genocide, genocide is relevant and linked to oil and gas. There is a modern study by the UNCTAD that has showed that the new discovery of gas in the basin of the Levant is 122 trillion cubic meter. And also when it comes to oil, we're talking about 1.7 billion barrels. And Israel talks about the war goes beyond the truce line, and the basin is in the Palestinian territories, 1967 border. And I think that the Gaza war is the basis of what is happening. And all what Trump is talking about is related to a control of Gaza, particularly the northern part of Gaza, the coastal part or the coastal areas, because this basin extends from the northern part of Gaza into the Syrian coast. So one of the reasons why we have such developments in Syria, because they are very much interested in energy that extends to the coastal area of Syria. The third component is the continuation of occupation and the violation of the rights of the Palestinians, their right to establish their state. After his inauguration, Trump convened a meeting with Netanyahu, and there were two objectives. The first objective is to save Netanyahu and his government from the brinkmanship of collapse, and also to continue what has not been continued throughout the 15 months of the aggression, and to expand the occupation, and the aim to reinforce the Abrahamic Accord. So, in other words, after the recent developments, Syria is going to be the key in order to do an ethnic cleansing for the Palestinians. If Jordan and Egypt, if they do not want this forced migration, as it has been said by Trump, so the situation will move to Syria. The ball is going to be in the court of Syria. In exchange of lifting of sanctions or funds when it comes to this forcible transfer, if it is not accepted by both Jordan and Egypt, because Syria is the main country that is targeted when it comes to the Palestinian dossier. The fall of Syria is going to impact the strategic issues taken, and also depriving the Syrian community from their national identity discourse. So this is the missing link when it comes to the developments, and after that there is going to be a pivotal problem as a result of the impact of international and regional players during the transitional phase, and we're going to see a kind of a static dictatorship that can lead perhaps to the division of Syria with the destruction of the Syrian military after the collapse of the Assad regime. This has led to the destruction of one of the countries in confrontation of Israel. So this is going to impact the situation, and will lead to the fact that the Arab world will lose the ability to protest in order to have two independent governments after the violations that have been committed by Israel and the fact that Trump aimed to conclude an agreement here. So this is in violation of Wadi Arab and Oslo, and this is a kind of a recycling process for Sykes-Picot. And perhaps peace will be proposed with Israel for the reconstruction of Syria and rebuilding of Syria. We have another thing which is to do with the transitional phase. In democracy, the ruling component has an exclusive hand. So the second point or the second mistake is going to be in the economy. The new rulers have adopted a liberal methodology, which is very extremist. This is the approach that had been adopted, and we do not see a correct application or implementation of transitional justice. This is what is being discussed by different universities. And also the image that the current rulers want to transfer to the rest of the world is different. In conclusion, with regard to the war of strategies in the Middle East, we are here facing three main problematics that can only be achieved if we see a level of solidarity in the face of this control. So we need to have cooperation. So there is an occupation. So the region is not going to see any peace unless this problem is solved radically. And the second thing is to put an end to the policy of double standardness used by the West. And the same shows once again in the confrontation of the war on Gaza and also when it comes to the war in Ukraine. And also we have self-monitoring practiced by the West because they fear the Israeli Holocaust, but do not fear the Palestinian Holocaust. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. Even though we wished to hear more about the strategies of Iran, but now we move to Mr. Murad Yashiltar, professor specialized in international relations, and maybe we need to hear about the Turkish strategy, especially that Turkey has been looked at as a winner from the latest developments, and now there is a case of fluidity. So go ahead, you have 10 minutes.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation, and I'm really happy to be here. This is my second time in Aljazeera forum. So before I answer the question about how Turkey is perceiving the regional developments, especially after two important developments such as the October 7th and the fall of Assad regime in Turkey, I would like to explain how does Turkey really look at the development in the regional level, because it is really important to see how Turkey is actually redesigning or readjusting its overall strategy in the region by analyzing at the regional developments, especially after the October the 7th and the fall of Assad regime. So I think number one argument is concerning the region in which Turkey is trying to understand is about the two things I think are simultaneously happening in the region. One is there are dynamics which has been declining since the October the 7th, and there are also dynamics which has been rising in the region after the fall of Assad regime. I think, first of all, what are the declining dynamics in the region and what are the rising dynamics in the region are really important to make sense about Turkish strategic perspective towards the future of region, especially Turkey's strategic perspective towards the post-Assad Syria, because post-Assad Syria will be also important in terms of the readjustment of the country's strategy and their reaction in the region. So when we look at the declining dynamics in the region, number one is about the decline of Iranian strategic and tactical leverages across the region. I think this is important because many countries now are trying to readjust their strategy in terms of the possible ramifications of the decline of Iranian influence in Lebanon, in Syria, to make sure that their strategy will be adopted by the new realities. The second one is the absence of Russian influence, which is really important, which is I think a changer development in Syria, and Turkey, of course, is going to readjust its overall strategy in Syria by taking into consideration the decline of Russian influence in Syria. So Russia has lost diplomatic leverages over Syria. Of course, we have still UN process. Still, we have still, a very strong reference towards the UN Security Council Resolution 2254. But at the end of the day, Turkey is going to, of course, readjust its strategy in terms of the declining influence of Russia, especially the military dynamics of the Russian declining influence in Syria, I think will be key factor for Turkey to shape its overall strategy. Number three, in terms of the declining dynamics in the region, is about the declining the proxy actors on the ground, which was really important, especially for the continuation of the Syrian civil war. Many countries actually has been losing their influence over the proxies or the non-state armed actors. For example, while Iran is losing its proxies in Syria, while Iran is suffering from the loss of Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria, Turkey is also now changing its overall strategy in terms of making a collaboration on the ground to maintain its political influence in Syria, because the new government, the transition government in Syria, one way or another, one reason or another, will have to establish a new Syrian army in which many non-state armed actors or military groups have to be part of it. So therefore, Turkey will have to also change its overall strategy concerning the number of non-state armed actors on the ground. So another one, of course, which is one of the, I think, key factors for the future of region is about the decline of narratives about the two-state solutions, unfortunately. Of course, this is sad, but when you look at the new administration in the United States, when you look at the assertiveness and aggressiveness of Israel and the reaction, the weak reactions of the regional countries towards this two-state solution, unfortunately, we can argue that the two-state solution from a political perspective, diplomatic perspective, has been in decline. So these are the declining dynamics. When we look at the emerging new dynamics in terms of the rising impact of the different actors and different states, of course, we see that the new Syria will be the key factors in the new region in terms of the changing geopolitical dynamics throughout Syria over the course of history. Now we are entering absolutely a new era, because Syria will be playing a critical role in engaging with different regional actors, especially with Turkey and other Arab countries in the region. So it will, certainly change the geopolitical calculus of many internal and external actors in the region. Of course, number two, in terms of the rising dynamics in the region, is the rise of Arab countries, the axis of Arab countries. So this is not only about the fall of Assad regime in Syria, but it is also part of the Trumpian, understanding about the Middle East. It will certainly provide a new opportunity for the Arab countries in the region in terms of readjusting their collaboration. But there are many challenges, as many speakers have mentioned in the previous sessions. So number three, in terms of the rising actors, is of course Turkey. Turkey's rise is not only part of the story concerning the Syria, but we have been observing since 2020 or 21 that Turkey's influence in the region has been rising in terms of, recalibrating its relations with the Arab countries, Gulf countries, under the concept of normalization. Turkey has been also rising as an important player, as an important military player, in terms of its potential contribution to establishment of new Syrian army, which will eventually impact the regional geopolitical calculus from the military balance of power. Unfortunately, there is another rising actor in the region. So many, speakers here are normally talking about the destructive role of Israel. Yes, Israel is a genocidal regime. We accept it, but unfortunately, because of the Israeli military, strategy, because of the Israel aggressive and assertive military strategy, and of course, with the Trump administration came to power in United States, will certainly consolidate and strengthen the Israeli position in the region. So, of course, we are criticizing the role of Israel in its relations with the genocidal activities in Gaza and its aggressive policies towards the neighboring countries. So, but we have to be very realistic in terms of clearly understanding the rise of Israel as a new actor in the region. So we don't know, it is not predictable how Israel is going to act against Iran in the upcoming months, or how Israel is going to act in Syria if Israel will not be happy about the consequences of the transitional government in Syria. Who is going to deter militarily Israel on the ground, as we saw it in the context of the early stage after the fall of Assad regime in Syria. So therefore, we have to be very careful in calculating the new dynamics, the emerging and rising dynamics in the region. Of course, the final point concerning the emerging dynamics, the new dynamics in the region, is the return of United States. Contrary to general argument in which United States is withdrawing from the Middle East, or when you look at the Trump's narrative about the Middle East, that we don't want to get into the conflict in the Middle East, including Syria, and United States is going to withdraw its troops from Iraq in 2025 in September, or United States is not interested in get involved into the conflict in Gaza. I think what's happening on the ground is that United States is returning to the Middle East. So it is not about the military return, but it is about the return of United States military deterrence that can, whenever Trump wants to do, United States can easily use its military deterrence or military tools against any actors in the region. So therefore, United States is not leaving from the region. So this is the rising, I think, factor in the context of regional dynamics. So, of course, for me, what we have now, it's really interesting. I think we are a very interesting turning point in the region in terms of understanding the nature of this transitional period. This is a transitional period in which the old geopolitical order, if you like the concept, is dying, but the new cannot be burned. So this is a transitional period. So there are, of course, number of divergencies and convergencies. When you look at the divergencies from the perspective of Arab countries, so there are divergencies. There is a lack of consensus vis-a-vis different issues in the region. So, and on the other hand, there is a very strong narrative about stability. But what is the definition of stability? How we are going to achieve this stability? What is the country's strategy in the region in terms of achieving stability in the region? It's really easy to talk about that we want stability. Everyone wants stability. But how we are going to reach, how we are going to achieve the stability? What kind of tools that you are going to use in achieving or to achieve this stability? So therefore, I think this transitional period is very critical, and the Turkish position is also changing after especially the fall of Assad regime in Syria towards of course, to promote more stable region. But there are also ambiguities in the context of how the different conflictual strategies can be managed by Turkey. Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا. إذا نحن أمام استراتيجيات متضاربة ومتصارعة وهناك عودة ردعية
strategies, and there is a deterrent return of the United States, as Dr. Murad says, to the region. So Al-Aqsa flood has blown up all strategies of all countries in the region. Chief among them is the occupying Israeli entity. So we need to look at this transition in strategies and how there is a conflict between them. And we listen now to Dr. Hassan Al-Barari, Professor of International Relations at Qatar University, to shed light on Israel. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Fatma. I thank Aljazeera Forum for hosting me for the second time, so they are pleased with me. The topic here is the war of strategies, and when I heard that, I felt as if the Arabs have a strategy, as if I were in a dream. Not all what I've seen is reactions by the Arab countries, but the Arab system is weak, vulnerable, rivalry infested. Even the moderate countries in it are rivals, and they don't have an initiative. They always call on Washington. So we have to go externally. Also, the Levant is of a colonial heritage and legacy in its form, whether they are with the resistance or with Israel or against them, it doesn't matter. So when we speak about strategies, strategy means three things: to have a strategic goal, second, to have the tool or the means to achieve this goal, third, the environment, which has risks, opportunities. And I took all that in order to answer your question, to be implemented on the Israeli case, to find that the strategic goal of Israel is clear, not starting today. And the Al-Aqsa flood comes from within the environment, which could be contained or to give it a chance. So they just want to Judaize the area of Palestine and to have it without Arab population. And many Arabs have been surprised with the displacement, as if it is a new religion. This exists, so it's no secret to say that the main goal of the Zionist movement is to gather the Jews in Palestine at the cost of the Aboriginals, and the mean is military force. Kutuczynski wrote 2 articles regarding on the Iron Wall with under that theme, and he's saying Arabs are primitive people and thus they can be controlled through military means when they lose over and over, and then they would come as if they are kneeling on their knees for the peace request. This is not only in reference to the Al-Aqsa flood, but Camp David gave credibility to the rationale regarding that administration and that approach. So Israel is still committed to its strategic goal, which is to occupy all of Palestine. And the presence of Palestine, from their point of view, is temporary. It doesn't mean that they will succeed, but the failure of this project requires a counter project which is absent. There are initiatives, individual initiatives, and Al-Aqsa flood is not an Arab strategy, but they are just something of an initiative, as if you are throwing a stone in a still water. So this grand strategy by the Zionists comes at the same time that there is no strategy by the Arabs whatsoever. They don't have a strategy. And we have seen even the Egyptian Arab plan, which will be discussed next week, is just a reaction to a plan that will uproot the Palestinians. The goal of Trump is to displace the Palestinians. And it's just like a one-way ticket. And it is not true that this is for the purpose of rebuilding Gaza in order that they will come back to it. This is not true at all. However, so that we will not be gloomy, the strategy of the Israelis is not without problems, is not infallible. As if Einstein says, it is foolish to do the same experiment 2 times with the same tools and expect the same results. So Israel has been given all the time to implement this project. The difference between us and the Israelis is that time for us is a factor, for them it is a player. That is why when they speak about the status quo, for us it is firm, but for them it is always creating new facts on the ground, and then they produce it as a fait accompli, because the Western mentality understands the fait accompli mentality, and thus we can understand the message of Bush in 2004, which says the United States will recognize the demographic changes that have taken place when the barrier wall or the racist wall was built. And it was to kick the Palestinians from the west of the wall and to confiscate their land. All these are tools to take the land, because the conflict is not religious, even though it has a religious factor. But those Jews have existed in Ukraine, but they do not have any problems with the others. But here they are occupiers. Even though if they are Arabs or whatever, or Muslims, they will be resistance to it. So the Israelis try to therefore prepare in order to say that we are not, as Zionists, so-called Zionists, are strangers in this region. So the Jews, if the goal is to Judaize this region, even though we see regional vulnerability and we see division in the Palestinian society, so the environment is changing. It doesn't mean that the balance was for the interest of the Arabs. The balance has ended when the infrastructure of the resistance has been dismantled in Syria and in Lebanon. And this retreat of Iran has given comfort to the Israeli side, which now is not facing any barrier except the internal Palestinian position, the heroic position of the Palestinians, which is the only obstacle facing the Israelis, and we hope for an Arab position that would be strong. What does that mean? Strong is not in terms of statements and slogans. We have heard that all along, and we memorize them in Arabic and English and Hebrew and French. No Arab child, but he or she says, I know what the Arabs will say. So the Israeli side understands that when there is something of a mechanism that has teeth and not just slogans. So this is a problem on the Arab side, because the Israelis see the flood as something totally different. We have looked at it as the decline of the Israeli deterrence, and Israel is about to surrender. They looked at it differently, by the way. They saw it as a historical golden opportunity to implement the displacement. So 8th of October, I was reading Yadout Ahronot newspaper, and the Kuteret, as they call it, headlines, which is there is a chance for displacement, and the Israeli right adopting this case, and they started working accordingly. So all the destruction in Gaza had no military justification but a political justification to change this area into unlivable area, so that someone like Trump will come forward and say that the vulnerability of the Arab region will allow Israel to go with this project. And the Zionist project wants the remaining of the status quo. And this status quo of Israeli hegemony cannot be achieved except through defeating Iran. And thus we see this conflict here now between Iran and Israel. Israel is armed by help of the West. I have so many things to say, but you exercised pressure against me. It is because of time, and only because you are Jordanian I have given you extra time, because we are from the same country.
I think this intervention was not really optimistic about the strategies and also talking about a high level of conflict that the whole region is heading into. This would lead us to Dr. Shafiq Shuqair. So we will listen to his intervention. It is going to be a panoramic kind of outline of the transformations taking place in the region. Dr. Shafiq, go ahead. Thank you very much, Dr. Fatima. My argument in my intervention is if we think that there is such thing as an Arab regime or system, so we have to look into how it organizes itself. We can talk about the roots of this Arab regime and how we can restore it or retrieve it. I argue here by talking about 5 attributes. These are testament to the formation of the previous regime. So we have the approvals between countries, particularly after the fall of the Berlin Wall, and as a result of that, we have had this access of resistance, and there was a consensus about the Palestinian cause. We're talking about a kind of a basic consensus about the Palestinian cause, which manifested in the text of the Beirut Conference text in 2001. Syria used to carry out 2 roles. The guarantor's role, which is about this mosaic in Lebanon and Syria, and the second role is the kind of officer of the region, and it used to also try to legalize the role of Iran and also what had happened during that particular era. That was the third role. The third component is linked to the region itself. So we should not forget that Israel wanted to preserve the status quo, although there were a number of transformations that took place, but at least these are the main components. So internally, everybody remembers there was a dialogue between the Islamists and the nationalists. The first explosion happened during the Arab Spring, and this had impacted this kind of arrangement or order. And after that, we have had groups such as Daesh, and those who were affiliated with Daesh used Daesh because the region was no longer satisfied with the situation in the Arab world. That's why the Iranian intervention became larger, and Iran moved ahead to confront Daesh, as it said, and some say that also they moved against the Arab Spring because they had their own interests. When the Aqsa flood is part and parcel of this situation of disorder, so this had led to the appearance of new questions, and Arabs wanted to go beyond certain things that were there through Abrahamic Accords that were signed, and the flood, when it came, it has proven that the situation is going to be impossible. I think these points are attempts to retrieve this Arab order, and we need to have a series of consensus. So we need to retrieve order in Syria, return of Syria. Does it mean that we're going to build a new Arab regime at the rubbles or on the rubbles of Gaza? We need to have the basic level of consensus as it had happened during the era of rapprochement and the second GCC war. Do we think that we're going to have a new consensus over Gaza, the two-state solution, and so on and so forth? The Arab regime perhaps would have the opportunity to unify its ranks. And the third point that I would like to talk about is to put an end to this fighting. So these are internal problems. These are not universal problems. When I say I am against the Islamists or the nationalists, these are part of many countries and these lead solutions. So very briefly, these are the 5 points. There are a number of situations of consensus to start from Syria and to have a basic consensus about the Palestinian cause and to redefine the interests of the region. And this means whether in our relationship with Iran or in our relationship with Turkey, and also to try to avoid any confrontation, internal confrontations. It corrects particularly that the interests of the region, the conflicting interests, if they move into our areas, whether within the nations or the peoples or within these Arab components, some say we need to have peace with Israel at the expense of Palestine, and some others say we need to have peace with Israel after finding a basic solution for Palestine. Such solutions are not going to lead to any consensus or any stability in the Arab.
Thank you, Dr. Shafiq, for giving us some time that would allow us to take some questions. And I was told that we have a chance for 2 questions, and now we have a chance for 4 questions because Shafiq was brief. So please identify yourself and to whom your question is posed. We start off with the lady in the second row. Peace be upon you. I'm Jude Abdelhadi, student. I have a question to Dr. Murad. You said that in one of the things that have declined after the events in Gaza was the two-state solution. But I beg to differ with this statement because Israel, since its outset, it was so clear regarding its view of the two-state solution. So even before the events, if things continued like they were before the 7th of October, I don't think that we would see any actual progress in the two-state solution or any democratic solution or non-democratic solution even. Please let your interjection be a mere question because we have so many people to give questions, to ask questions. So please, if you have a question, go ahead with it. I'm curious to know your view regarding this issue and how can this be a reality. Third row, next to Dr. Azzuddin. In the name of God, the gracious, the merciful, I have a question. Please identify yourself. Fawaz al-Nimr, and the question is to Dr. Barari and Dr. Shqir. Dr. Shqir, we always hear reports about what our leaders and presidents in the Arab world say. And it is said that what is said in closed meetings is different from what is announced in the newspapers and in the media. And here is the question regarding the displacement. The evident position is great by all Arab countries and Arab regimes. Is this the real position as you expect? And I don't want to embarrass anybody in particular to give an answer. Jihad Adla, journalist. The question is to Dr. Barari and Dr. Shqir. I think many Arab intellectuals do not have a clear vision of the national Arab security vision. Speaking of the war of strategies, maybe the Arabs are in desperate need to a clear strategy in terms of Arab defense in this sensitive phase of transition. Can there be a strategy built to preserve the national Arab security where especially that anyone could come out and be against this strategy? Thank you. Mr. Amjad, this is the last question because we have to go back to the panelists. Amjad Jibril, Bahith in Regional Affairs. The problem in the Arab regime, the identity is not clear, the boundaries are not clear. So I agree with Dr. Hassan that there is no Arab regime and thus there is no Arab strategy. However, the developments in Syria, could they lead to a collective identity where there is cooperation between the Arabs and the Turks to restore to the area some weight internationally and to have also power, relatively speaking? Also, I think we shouldn't talk much about a big role for Syria because the country is so exhausted. It looks like post-war Egypt. So it needs maybe 10 years to be able to breathe. Also, can there be democratic experiences born in the Arab countries? So how can there be democracy in Syria or Egypt or Lebanon or Jordan while Israel is there? I think there are others who want to raise questions, but we don't have much time. So we will focus on the questions raised already. And the focus was on Dr. Hassan and Dr. Shafiq to give their answers. And there was a question to Dr. Shiltash. So I will give you a chance, all of you, and to Dr. Ferdowsi. We start off with Dr. Hassan and to give an answer. Dr. Fatima, thank you, and thank you for the questions. And the first question was so important from Fawaz and Nimr regarding the national position. This question was raised of late in terms of what is pronounced or announced and the real positions. I understood that the king rejected displacement during his meeting with Trump. What about Jordan? For Jordan, displacement is very difficult and it means the getting rid of the current regime. That is to tinker with the national identity, and so here, when you take those millions to Jordan, then you are solving the demographic problem for the Israelis at the cost of the Palestinians and the Jordanians and transfer the problem. Will Jordan accept that? No. The king will reject that and the people will reject that. So will the king withstand his position? So is there an Arab regime? Until now, or the Arab system, I don't see an Arab system. I see it as vulnerable, full of rivalry. Otherwise, where would Trump have the courage to say the Arabs will accept no matter what? In terms of what you said regarding the Arab system or Arab framework, there is no definition of that because the Arab countries are in transformation. And with the transformation comes the question is, what do we want? So there is no stable Arab system or regime. And for the framework, this is a good term. That is why we can speak about 2 points. Rebuild the Arab world starting from Syria. Also consensus over the Palestinian cause, because we cannot have consensus on other issues like the Palestinian cause. Also, who will be harmed from the current situation? Syria has to do a trade-off with Turkey. Before, Syria used to legalize the region's position with the Arab world. Now, Turkey has a position in Syria, and the Arabs also want Turkey to help Syria and Syria has to be given a chance to help. Turkey has to be given a chance, and Syria has to be given a chance. And the issue of Iran, I will leave it for the other panelists. Dr. Murad.
Thank you.
شكرا. طبعا أنا لا أجادل بأن حل دولتين مستحيل. أنا أؤمن
based on the 1967 borders and the occupation in Israel, in Al-Quds and other places in Palestine should be ended. But what I am trying to say is that a two-state solution as a narrative has been in decline. So number one reason is about the Israeli position, and we have to ask the question that what will be the price for Israel if Israel is thinking to annexation or invasion of West Bank with the support of United States. So what will be the price? So unfortunately, we don't have the answer for this question. So this is the reason that I'm saying the regional actors are now prioritizing their survival on the expense of the laws of Palestinian issue or cause. So probably they will tend to prefer more realistic, right, options while they're approaching, especially towards the United States under the context of, the Abraham Accord, so-called, peace in the Middle East. So this is the reason why I'm saying that the two-state solution as a narrative has been declining.
Thank you. دكتور فردوسي بور
Dr. Fordowsi,
هل يمكن أن نركز
can we focus on a point? Are we headed towards a higher level of conflict with Israel, between Israel and Iran? You have 1 minute. Thank you, Dr. Fatima. We are in a desperate need for new realities in the region and new dynamics. So now, here we are speaking of the strategy of wars, and to restore the issue of the strategies, there should be a coalition between Arab countries and Muslim countries, Saudi, Masr, Iran, وهكذا, to face the coalitions and the dynamics of the other side. So I don't think there is a war because Israel is not ready. Behind closed doors, there are agreements with Netanyahu, especially in his latest meeting with Trump, that they agreed to have a war against Iran or to bomb their nuclear facilities. However, Israel does not have a strategic position or a strategic depth because they are in the scope of Iranian missiles dimension. I thank you, Dr. Firdausi Poor, Dr. Muradia Shiltash, Dr. Shafiq Shqir, Dr. Hassan Al-Barari. And I would like to say that we have a short break and then the fourth session, the Middle East, in light of new dynamics. Thank you all for your good listening. The break is for 10 minutes.